was located in kind of an upscale part of town. It was a very large parish that had been around for a lot of years, and it boasted all kinds of ministries. It really seemed to be kind of a model Catholic church in this particular city. And it had numbers of ministries that were up and running and just kind of ahead of the game. And they had all kinds of events that people would attend. So it really was the parish that kind of people looked up to. One day, the mass, a crowded mass, the priest is preaching, and a person comes in through the main door, walking down the aisle, dressed really poorly, in shabby clothes, and dirty and unshaven, hair all messed up, with a baseball cap still on, carrying some plastic shopping bags with him as he kind of shuffled down the aisle. And he took a seat right in the front pew. And it was noticeable that as this man was coming in, everybody's heads were turning. And the priest obviously lost his homily at that moment. He saw how distracted everybody seemed. He also heard that some people started mumbling to themselves, like, who is this guy and what is he doing here? Some of the ushers actually came down the aisle and were talking to the man, and who are you? And what are you doing here? Some of them tried to usher him to the back of the church. And the gentleman who was sitting there didn't resist at all. He just kind of got up and followed the ushers to the back. And then the priest announced that this man is really their permanent deacon who is assigned to the parish. And when he took off his baseball cap, people recognized him and kind of laughed at first, but then they felt indicted. They recognized that they had simply judged this guy on the basis of his appearance, thinking him to be a bum, a street person who had kind of aimlessly wandered into the church. But in fact, it was their permanent deacon. And the permanent deacon and the priest had planned this to kind of put the parish to the test. In the gospel, in the first reading from the letter of James, James has to remind people, show no partiality. Do not treat people differently on the basis of their social status or who they might be. And he gives the example, if somebody in fine clothes and jewelry comes in and you cater to them, you patronize them, oh, sit here, welcome. And then another poor person comes in and you disregard that person, say, sit in the back or sit at my feet. Then you have shown partiality, you've made distinctions between God's people. Why would James say this? Because the early Christian community was experiencing this kind of division. There were the rich and there were the poor in early Christianity. And those small Christian communities had to come to terms with the fact that not all of their members were alike, and that there were people there from all walks of life. And because there were divisions, James addresses this. One of the reasons that we should not make distinctions is because God doesn't. God shows no partiality. He loves all of his children equally. And if we look at the person of Jesus, we can see that Jesus came among us with great richness in his divinity. He could have been treated like a king. But what did Jesus do? He chose to divest himself of his glory and to take the form of a slave. And we know from the ministry of Jesus that he associated with the poor and the lowly. These were, in fact, the people who were most responsive to his teachings, the ones who actually followed him around. In the gospel today, Peter is making his own distinctions. It's easy for him to profess, you're the Christ, you're the Messiah, the Son of God. He must have felt good about the fact that Jesus congratulated him on that revelation. But as soon as Jesus speaks about the kind of Messiah he is, the one who must suffer and die like a criminal, Peter takes issue with him. God forbid that you should go through something like that. You deserve better. You're not like a criminal. And Jesus rebukes him and says, you're looking at me through human eyes instead of looking at me through the eyes of God. Jesus himself makes no distinctions. He's present to, he ministers to, he loves all of his people. And he is one with his people by willing to go through his suffering and death. So I think there's a great message for us in this. How do we respond to people who are on the fringes of society? How do we feel when we see someone who is obviously not of our same socioeconomic class walking through our neighborhood or moving into the neighborhood? I was thinking about this morning. We spend so much time as a society trying to figure out, how do we deal with homelessness? How do we solve this problem of people on the streets? How do we make sure that people have enough food to eat? And through all these policy-making decisions in our debate, the one thing we forget to do is to treat these people with respect and dignity. I don't think God is asking us to solve the problem. He's asking us to simply treat each other as brothers and sisters, children of God, to look upon the poor, to look upon those who are different as the presence of Christ himself, who became poor for our sake. So food for thought. How do we look at people who are different? Can we see through the outward appearance into the heart of a person? Can we strive to find the goodness of God, the love of Christ in people we meet each day?